Hello, my name is Jeffrey Haas. I'm the Chief International Officer of DraftKings. DraftKings is the global leader in daily fantasy sports. And when I tell people that, the first question they normally ask is, what is daily fantasy sports? So I suggest I start with a definition, and then we can get into what the business looks like. So daily fantasy sports, for those of you who are familiar with season-long fantasy sports, it's effectively the same thing but played over a much shorter duration of time. Like traditional season-long fantasy sports, with daily fantasy sports, what you're doing is selecting a number of players across multiple teams who are playing in different events, either in one day or across a week of events, in order to create a roster or lineup of players who you can select based on a salary cap formula. We have a fixed cap of, say, $50,000 to spend on the salaries of the different players who are participating in a certain contest or series of events, and then they're entered as a lineup into a contest. You can then enter that lineup into one or many contests over a course of a day in order to be competing with your friends, with family, with other people all over the world in order to test your skill. There are opportunities to win real money prizes in daily fantasy sports contests, but there's also an opportunity to win special experiences through various partners we have around the world. This is something that is very exciting as a business model and something we're starting to see players become incredibly engaged in. Something to note is that this industry has only really been around for 6 years, primarily in North America, and now we're starting to see presence in Europe. We've launched in the UK quite recently, and we'll talk a little bit about who we are as a business and how we are growing around the world. Just a really important point to note is our core demo is males, typically between 21 and 35. As I mentioned, the industry has only been around for 5 or 6 years. DraftKings was founded in 2012 by some people over at a company called Vistaprint, who had an idea for creating a really compelling digital sports proposition to engage players in a meaningful way. They developed DraftKings with an intent of creating the best daily fantasy sports product in the industry, and that's what players have told us who have played in the United States. DraftKings has risen to become the fastest growing company in daily fantasy sports. We have all of the major American sports. We started with baseball in an attempt to make sure our systems worked before NFL or American gridiron football started. Now, beyond just the core American sports, we also have golf, which has a core international appeal, and we've been investing heavily in proper football, meaning Champions League, English Premier League, Major League Soccer, and the intent is to add other football leagues from around the world in order to cater to the largest addressable sports audience in the world, who are football fans. But beyond just football as an expansion opportunity, we are looking at other local sports in local markets as we expand. So that means we're looking at golf as a serious growth opportunity. We're also looking at the opportunities around cricket and rugby, Aussie rules football, etc. So as we expand around the world in the years to come, you can look at us as having the largest global contests for global sports, as well as the largest local contests, in order to create a great pool of liquidity for players to compete against each other and test their daily fantasy sports skills. Another thing that's really important, given some of the discussions here today, is in respect to esports. We have launched an esports vertical with a focus on League of Legends to start. It's a growing sector within our ecosystem, and we're starting to see a lot of players come in order to play daily fantasy sports on esports competitions. For this audience, I think that's key. Why DFS is unique is that it is a game of skill. In fantasy sports, the outcome of a contest is directly influenced by the skill of the player. There's a nearly infinite number of opportunities to create a lineup that gets entered into a contest, and it requires players to have knowledge and skill to consistently succeed. This is something that's been analyzed by various academics in a number of well-respected institutions, and they've clearly come to the conclusion that daily fantasy sports is a game of skill. The complex nature of the games offered by DraftKings allow players then to exercise their skills against other players. The key point is that in order to be successful, you need to apply your skills to have the best lineups to go on and win contests. Here, we have a couple screenshots of our product for some people who haven't seen this. This is the web-based product. On the left-hand side, you see a series of different contests from different sports with the entry fee. In some cases, it's free to enter. In other cases, there's a paid entry fee. We will put up guaranteed prize pools, or GPPs, where players have an opportunity to win prizes. And typically what we'll do is guarantee a large first place as well. This is something that has proven to be very successful. And on the right-hand side, we have the draft screen, where we have a series of different players' names, what team they're playing for against the competitors' teams, and what their salary is for that particular event. So keeping in mind your total salary cap, you then select a number of players from different teams in the different events in order to create a lineup, which you then submit, and then that is matched up against all of the other lineups in a particular contest, and the people who have scored the highest at the end of that competition are then going to receive the prizes based in the order of ranking. This is something that is a really interesting opportunity for sports fans to exercise their knowledge, and what we do is we create massive amount of interest and engagement in sports in the lead up to kickoff or tee off, and it's something that players really enjoy. As part of the experience, you're not just selecting based on pedestrian knowledge, but people who take daily fantasy sports very seriously go to great lengths to educate themselves, to make sure they're informed about key events in sports, what's happening with the players they're selecting, who is going to be as part of the starting lineups, and any other factors that may impact the performance of the athletes they're selecting as part of their roster on a given day. So what we have here is the player card, and what will happen is when you're selecting your lineup, you can look at the player card in order to understand recent performance, because recent performance will directly correspond with the salary that's been determined for an individual player. And you can also continue to log in here right up until the start of a contest. When that contest starts, or in the lead up to that, there's an opportunity to see if a player may be injured, which can occur right up until the actual start. As well, in football, there's an opportunity to see which players are part of starting lineups. And this is true both on the desktop and mobile products. As part of the research, we also drive a lot of players to our own Playbook site. On an esports perspective, we have a hud.playbook.com. This is something that a lot of our esports fans are paying close attention to, but also we produce content regularly to help educate players about how to play optimal daily fantasy sports, to educate themselves and improve their performance in the games. We encourage people to go visit Playbook in order to understand our product better and to understand how to be competitive and more successful in daily fantasy sports. Effectively, while we are essentially a gaming company, we're also becoming a media company, because we drive so much engagement with our players who are visiting our site and visiting our apps on a regular basis. They're seeking to play the games, but also to become better at playing those games, to be more competitive, and they read the content we produce, but we also sustain a broad media infrastructure around daily fantasy sports, where players have an opportunity to read content and get subscriptions for fantasy sites, etc. This is what the product looks like on a mobile perspective. In the UK, we have launched with mobile only as a strategy in order to get onto people's devices and really provide a rich mobile gaming experience. You can see the contest lobby, draft screen, and game center here. This is something that a lot of people are looking at on a constant basis. And when we talk about engagement, I'll also talk about partnerships. While we do work with a lot of the American sports franchises, we're starting to work with a number of international franchises as well. We were very proud recently to announce partnerships with Arsenal FC in the Premier League and Liverpool FC in the Premier League. I think there's going to be an opportunity to see the number of team deals, the breadth and depth of the sports we cover increase substantially over time. I mentioned earlier about engagement in our product. One of the things that's really tremendous is that we influence game day routines. In the UK, where a player will wake up in the morning and normally go down to the pub in time for a 12:45 kickoff, now they'll go down a little earlier because they want to read who are the starting players in their lineup. Do they have the right players selected? Should they do a global swap? But what they really want to do is ensure that their experience watching the games play out on television are really enriched by a competitive daily fantasy sports experience that occurs in parallel to that. This particular chart over here shows the growth during key sporting moments. And so what DraftKings has seen is we've seen spikes in engagement with the DFS platform, and this graph is from week 5 of the NFL 2015 season. A few of the key points here you see is at 11:40 we'll send out a push notification to our player database, and that will cause a spike. At noon, we're starting to see players of the daily fantasy sports product come in and have an opportunity to look to see any last-minute injury reports. And then you see the engagement continue to build right up until kickoff, because that is the moment where players, are locked into their contest entries with the lineups they've selected. And it's really phenomenal for us to see that at the peak time, on week 5 of NFL, we had 400,000 people looking at our site and our app at that time. We're creating a massive audience through our product, which we're reaching through our messaging and reaching through some of the opportunities we have to follow the sports that they already love. I mentioned earlier about the time of the push notification, and then when the pregame starts on TV in the United States, we have an ad that runs on TV in order to drive last-minute engagement, and then we actually have the kickoff right at 1 p.m. And it's phenomenal to see how we can, through the different channels we have for communication, drive further engagement to get people to come visit our app and our website, and really have an opportunity to increase the enjoyment and engagement with DraftKings. Around that, the engagement doesn't just stop when the game has started, because players have invested in creating a great lineup that they hope is going to be competitive inside a contest while they're watching TV. It's most often a second screen experience. You have your mobile while you're sitting at a pub and you're watching TV, or you're using 3 screens if you're also on your laptop doing work like me. And when key moments occur, such as in the United States when Rob Gronkowski scores, we see what is called the Gronk Effect on our systems. And you can just see that, when he scored here, we had 900,000 people actually, immediately go to the app in order to see how their scores in the DFS contests have been impacted by one of the most popular players, who many of them have selected, has improved or decreased their standings. It's very interesting for us to see the real-time nature of engagement of our product and how that gets people very excited. If you're a Premier League fan, last weekend you might have been following the Arsenal-Leicester match when Jamie Vardy scored at the beginning and it was 1-0. It was phenomenal to see, although on a much smaller scale, the impact of many of our British players going to the app and the website in order to see how that affected their own DFS contest entries. Well, we are primarily a North American business because that's where we started off. Our intent is to be a significant global operator. We're looking at many opportunities in many jurisdictions around the world, and as part of that, we need to educate ourselves about the opportunities that exist. We have launched into the UK market. We're only 10 days old. The initial KPIs for us are quite strong, and we're optimistic about the opportunity for growth, but we're not at a point to share any numbers yet. One of the challenges we have is in respect to different regulatory views on daily fantasy sports. How can we continue to expand and offer our product and service around the world based on different regulatory views in different jurisdictions? And we're in many different discussions with prospective regulators in different places around the world. And it's interesting to see how some regulators are taking a very proactive and modern view towards creating a regulatory regime that looks at daily fantasy sports as a clear game of skill, is interested in offering licenses for game of skill in order to essentially protect consumers, because we're holding the money of the consumers, and it's important for them to understand not only are we offering a fair game, but we're also offering a secure environment. We're segregating their funds from the rest of our operating funds, and there's an opportunity for them to feel safe and secure in their gaming experience. So the Malta Gaming Authority in December announced a new regulatory regime with 2 classes of skill games licenses. I know there are a lot of people here in the esports industry. I'm not sure you're aware that while the first class of these skill gaming licenses from the MGA are for fantasy sports, the second class is actually for esports, because they are interested in ensuring consumer safeguards for game integrity, but also for ensuring suitable operators are in business and giving consumers a good opportunity to play in a responsible fashion. So these are the things we're working on as we take a look at global opportunities for our business. It's important to consider that the scale of what we've done in the US is just a starting point. The largest contest ever run in daily fantasy sports was on 13th of September 2015, when we had a $20 buy-in contest with a $10 million guaranteed prize pool. We had $2 million for first place and $1 million for second place. And this was for an American sport that is largely popular in America, but starting to expand into other places around the world, such as the UK, where the NFL International Series has expanded to. Mexico, it's very big as well. But as we start taking a look towards real significant global sports such as football, Premier League, Champions League, Bundesliga, La Liga, Series A, there is an opportunity for us to create contests that dwarf those of the American sports. Also, golf has global appeal. I think esports will have significantly greater appeal in the years to come. And it's very interesting for us to contemplate the prospective size of the markets as we grow, because we then need to invest appropriately in system scalability and stability to ensure we're providing all of our players with a great experience. Our international expansion, this is a nice photo of Vinay, who's the Chief Commercial Officer of Arsenal Football Club of the Premier League, with our CEO, Jason Robbins. We announced our partnership 2 weeks ago, just before we launched in the UK, and Arsenal are a phenomenal partner for us, because what we're doing is working with them to drive. First of all, we have to establish credibility in the UK, and Arsenal definitely have helped us with that. It's also about education, and they're allowing us to talk to their fans in a compelling and authentic way to teach them about what daily fantasy sports is for Premier League games. And they're also helping us with points of presence in and around their stadium and games and digital messaging. Conversely, we're also going to help them expand their brand in the United States, where we have 6.5 million registered customers today, and there's an opportunity for us to work with Arsenal and the Premier League and any other sports body, organization, or club we're affiliated with around the world, reach our existing audience in the United States while we seek to expand around the world and reach their audiences as well. So we're very happy with the partnerships we have, and we're definitely looking for more across sports bodies and media companies and other organizations as well. Our launch in the UK, which, as I said, just occurred 10 days ago, was very well received by players in particular, and also by media. We've seen some really colorful coverage, looking at the products and looking at the business and the partnerships, and many of the players have also been communicating with us to give us feedback, lots of love, a little bit of critical viewpoints on how we can improve what we're doing. And it's exciting to see that we're starting to engage players in the UK in the same way as we're engaging them in the United States and Canada. It also means that as we continue to expand around the world, we're going to talk to them in the same direct and hopefully authentic and credible ways in order to further drive engagement and grow the scalability of our business to give players the best possible experience. A few other screenshots from some of our announcements with our partners. And then just a few key points to close with. Daily fantasy sports is a burgeoning sector with unparalleled growth opportunity. There's so many opportunities around the world for us to come into a market and talk to sports fans in a compelling way, to give them an opportunity to engage in the sports they love in a really meaningful, authentic, and competitive way, and also to discover new sports. There's no reason why people can't be surprising themselves with finding new love for other sports. We launched in the UK, as I said, 10 days ago. Our number one sport by far is football, Champions League and Premier League. Our number two is golf, and then I'm very interested to see the rest of the outliers because we have a very small NHL presence in the UK. I never expected that. You know, there's a lot of people who are interested in NBA. Clearly, NBA have been investing in the UK for a number of years. As we start going into other markets, it'll be interesting to see where there are outliers on the curve for sports fans who will live all over the world. I don't think that there is any limit on the potential growth of daily fantasy sports. As we go into new markets, we're going to be reaching global audiences, people who love cricket, Aussie rules football, Bundesliga, and many other sports organizations. So it's very new for us. It's very exciting for us. Our intent is to continue to grow, to continue to engage with customers, and continue to build a better product in order to give players the best possible experience. I'm very pleased to be here today to have an opportunity to learn a lot about esports. I think that will be one of the strongest growth areas of our business moving forward, in tandem with the growth of esports in general, not only with League of Legends, which we have today, but perhaps we'll be adding Death of the Ancients and Counter-Strike and some of the other emerging games that we've been listening about today. That is my presentation. Any questions?
Well, I'll kick off a question. So, games of skill, I've seen that argument you applied in the US before for games like sort of poker, and then we had the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act sort of came by, and then sort of state by state. So how does it actually, what's the current state of play in the US regarding, is this gambling or is it not gambling, and where is fantasy sports allowed to be done when there's cash out?
So every jurisdiction in the world looks at regulations for gaming in different ways. And there are different tests that can apply on that. In the UK, they clearly regulate any contest that awards a prize, requires a license from the UKGC. In Denmark, they grant licenses for fantasy manager games, which are fantasy sports. In Malta, they're now looking at daily fantasy sports as games of skill. So there's a huge variance as far as not only what the regulatory regime will be around DFS, but also in respect to what the tax treatments are, both for the players and the operators. So we're going through a process of educating ourselves about what those rules are going to be as we continue to expand.
And what's the current state in the US? How does things go in the US at the moment?
Well, in the US, we see some very proactive positions being taken by regulators in places like Massachusetts, where they're working on creating new regulations with consumer safeguards in mind.
I'll bring the microphone over.
Hello. I work in localization. Are you going to support game fans in France and Germany and Holland in their native languages?
Eventually, we'll offer a localized product. We don't have we only operate in 3 markets today, which is Canada, the US, and the UK. It's all English, not necessarily the same English, but mostly the same English. If I take a long-term view, I'll definitely say that we'll have localized offers in all of our key markets. I don't know if we'll necessarily go into France very quickly. Germany is definitely a very interesting market, as is the Netherlands. We haven't yet announced where we'll be going to after the UK.
Okay, cheers, thanks.
You mentioned that you have a mobile version only before. Do you see players paying more on that as opposed to what they're playing on the dual option?
So we've launched in the UK with iOS and Android only. We will have a web version following in about 3 or 4 weeks. I think mobile first as a strategy has a lot of credibility because you're able to touch players on their devices. You're able to reach them through push notifications. You're able to, be parts of their lives in a more meaningful way than you can be if you just have a responsive website to start off, because the messaging opportunities are substantially diminished there. I do believe having a full platform available will be the best way to offer a great experience to players. That is coming in time, but when we were looking at the prioritization, we decided on mobile first launch as a really good way to enter the market, and we'll probably do that again in other markets as we expand.
And that would be for paid acquisition as well?
I'm sorry, pardon me?
To enter the markets, the new markets internationally?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
In terms of growing channels that you create, how is this different than in the US?
How is it? Well, in the US, when we launched in 2012, we were website only. and that wasn't necessarily even a responsive website. That evolved over time. The mobile apps just emerged 2 years ago, so at that point we then needed to encourage players to become multi-platform. I think that can be a challenge when people are used to playing in a certain way. We feel that the mobile experience is very, I hope it's very well designed. We have really good UX people and UI people, and the feedback from players has been very positive. Our intent is to be available on every channel, even on our mobile devices. We support Apple Watch, and we have a lot of people who are using that functionality. A lot of people, respectively. I don't know how well their watch sales are going these days.
Okay, thank you.
Since you have already entered the European countries, so do you have any idea to enter the East, such as China? China is very big in terms of NBA in the world.
I love China. I think it's a phenomenal country and marketplace. We are very interested in going into China. I think that the appeal of some of our existing games will really resonate there, in particular Premier League matches, and we have Liverpool and Arsenal deals there. We also know that NBA is growing very strong, and we have a significant NBA population in our ecosystem. I think that the opportunity to extend those to China and also add I think it's the Chinese Football League is significant. We don't yet have a partner. I think that in order to be successful in China, you must have a local partner with strong marketing reach and an understanding of the regulatory environment. I think that is something that will likely occur in the future. I can't comment on when that might be.
Okay, well, Jeffrey, thank you very much. It was awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you.